We're going to start with Bayern Munich, but we're going to start with a character that I never seem to be able to shake loose. Thomas Müller, joining me here in beautiful British Columbia, Stefan. Um, and we're speaking uh almost 1 p.m. Vancouver time on a Tuesday. And I mean, I've already reported this on Blue Sky. The initial approach was reported by a few places. I know Tom Bogart has been on this as well, The Athletic. I reported then, or broke the story yesterday, that the Whitecaps had cleared the final hurdle to sign Thomas Müller, which was. And Stefan, if you were glazing over here because I'm throwing around a lot of terminology that makes no sense to anyone who doesn't follow MLS, that's fine. I totally get it. So maybe grab a coffee or something that you can can drink or sip from, or grab a beer, whatever you need to get through this little next thing. MLS has this thing called discovery rights. Now, if you are already aware of what MLS is and how it works, then you're going to be fine. For everyone else, the rest of the world, yes, this is idiotic. I know it makes no sense, but it doesn't change the fact that it's there. So at the beginning of this season, Cincinnati placed Thomas Müller on the discovery rights list. It's a mechanism that is there to ensure that clubs don't outbid each other for players, right? It gave Cincinnati the exclusive rights to negotiate with Thomas Müller. So yeah, in other words, it didn't discover him playing on the fields of Bavaria back in 2000 something, right? Like they put him there this year. It's a dumb name for really a mechanism that ensures exclusivity in negotiations. Thomas Müller rejected that move to Cincinnati. Many reasons. He didn't want to go to a club that necessarily just saw him as a marketing vehicle. He wanted to go somewhere where he was seen an important part of the squad. He didn't necessarily want to go to Ohio. He had preferred targets. One of them was LAFC. That wasn't possible because they were looking into signing Heung-min Son instead. So that wasn't possible for him. And then, Vancouver with their German sporting director Axel Schuster very quickly entered the conversation. They thought they couldn't make this happen because they didn't have the roster space or the designated player spot. Designated player is a player that you can pay unlimited amount of money without him hurting your salary cap. But then it quickly appeared that Thomas Müller was actually willing to play for very little money. He's going to actually join for a deal worth $1.7 million over the entire season, or just $750,000 for the rest of the year, with the prospect of becoming a designated player next year. And I understand that deal is done and dusted. Thomas Müller is going to sign a contract with the Whitecaps once he has cleared his personal contracts and, what do you call them? Image rights and all that sort of stuff. Definitely with MLS, that needs to be still cleared. But I have been told that is just a minor obstacle and shouldn't be an issue. So yeah, that is pretty much the breaking news story of, I guess, the last few days in Canada. It's a massive story in Canada. The last big signing with a global appeal that joined a Canadian club was Didi Drogba when he joined the CF Montreal.
Who's it called? Who's it that joined Toronto? Was it
Yeah,
Giovinco?
Insigne, but that was such a
Insigne, that's the
disaster.
story.
No one wants to talk about that because it turned out so badly, right? In fact, that contract was terminated a few weeks ago. So
Yeah. Do you know, I
yeah,
used to listen to this podcast. I think it was a radio station in Canada called The Score.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
it still going?
It's still there. Yeah, the score is
Yeah, I
still
used to
around.
listen. They used to have a footy show that I used to listen to when I was younger, and I think this is just when Toronto were kind of getting their vibes about them, and then that
Yeah.
deal went through. And obviously, I had no interest in MLS football, but that kind of drew me in because it was just chaos every single week. So, well, I can't
Oh,
imagine Thomas Muller will be the same. I think he's a bit more of a chilled out character, but
yeah.
you never know.
It's actually, yeah, I mean, Jovinko was the one that worked out. He wasn't as big of a name as Insigne, but Jovinko, the atomic ant, they called him in Toronto, did win them an MLS Cup, in fairness. So, that worked out. But then they went for Insigne. And remember, that was a big story for Transfermarkt because they asked, I forgot the name of Toronto sporting director at the time. They asked him like, "Oh, how did you end up signing Insigne?" And he's like, "Oh, I went on Transfermarkt and looked up which Italians were without a contract by the end of the season, and Insigne was on top of the list." And he said that on record. It was a good day for us as a company, Stefan. Not a good day for him because it doesn't exactly
Wasn't the
highlight good
first.
scouting skills.
He wasn't the first, and he won't be the last. Trust me, it
Yeah,
happens all the time.
all the time.
I think
But
half our
yeah,
web traffic is just players, coaches, and agents trying to figure out who's out of work in 3 or 4 months' time.
yeah. No, this is true. And then they check in with us to see whether that's actually accurate. We deal with agents like that all the time. No, and I mean, like Thomas Müller, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, it's pretty cool because, as you said, he's a much more low key. I've been told for him the most important part at this point of his career is just that he wants to kick around the ball a little bit longer, play some football, maybe have a chance to win the title. Whitecaps are second in the Western Conference, so they are considered one of the teams that could win the MLS Cup this year. And also they're still in the Canadian Championship, which is the equivalent of the FA Cup. They're in the semi-final in that, so there is prospect of silverware, and he is currently the most decorated German player, together with Toni Kroos. I guess if he wins an MLS Cup, then I don't know where we would rank that, but I think it would put him just over Toni. So maybe there's that for him. But I've been told that the big drawing point for Müller actually to join the Whitecaps was a conversation with the head coach Jesper Sørensen. They had a long call, and Sørensen came up with he explained to him how he would use him tactically, that he would want to coach him, that there is a really important role for him in the squad. That he didn't see him just as a marketing signing, but someone who could help them, make that final hurdle and win a trophy. And I think that's actually really interesting that even at the age that Thomas Müller's at, turning 36 in September, has won everything that there is to win in his career. But I thought that was a really interesting insight on how important it is for these players to speak to coaches and being kind of involved in the plan that, the coach has envisioned for them. And I thought that was such a fascinating aspect because we remember when we had the Florian Wirtz story between Bayern and Leverkusen, Bayern and Liverpool, right? And ultimately came down to Arne Slot's plan and the vision that he had playing Florian Wirtz. And I thought it was so fascinating how important something like that can be for a player and how it can sway a player to make a move to a club, even though it doesn't necessarily mean the best financial deal at times. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, well, Thomas Miller's been getting paid more money than God for the last kind of 20 years at Bayern,
Yeah.
hasn't he? So I'd be amazed if finances were something that were extremely important to him. Um, he did seem quite kind of lackadaisical almost when it came to like what his career, where he'd end up in his career next. And I mean, Manu, do you think? I know you just kind of explained it how he did kind of end up at Vancouver, but do you think that was his intentions from the get go, or do you think players like Thomas Muller get told by their agent, "Hey, you can go play in MLS,"
Hmm.
and then because of the way MLS works,
Yeah.
these guys just go straight to the MLS office, and then it's up to MLS to like basically pitch them on like 5 areas in North America that they can go live for the next 3 or 4 years. Is that
Yeah,
how this works? Yeah.
it's not wrong. It's not always how this works, but it's not wrong. I understand that when the deal with Cincinnati started falling through, and then Sydney FC burst onto the scene with an offer for Thomas Müller, that MLS got really worried about losing him potentially to a different league because it's still an important marketing vehicle for them, right? And then they went around the league and phoned different clubs. Hey, do you have space? I know, and this has been reported. They spoke to Philadelphia Union. That deal fell through at the time because of financial demands by Muller's camp. I know they spoke to two other MLS teams, and I've been asked by them not to mention them, but I know they spoke to at least two other MLS teams. They also circled back one more time to LAFC. And because that's out there, I have no problem mentioning them. And then they spoke twice to Vancouver. And the first time Vancouver said, like, look, we can't make it happen. And then MLS actually came back to them through intermediaries and said, like, he really wants to go there. And also we would find a way for you to make it work in your salary cap. So Yes, the league does, because like all players are signed by the league. Clubs are franchises, they're not individual units. And yes, there's issues with that with FIFA, and technically that's illegal because it's like multiple club ownership of contracts and all that sort of stuff. But that's the mechanism here, right? Thomas Müller will sign a contract with MLS, and then that contract will be allocated to the Whitecaps. The reality, of course, is different. The Whitecaps are the ones negotiating with the Müller camp, and figuring out salary, etc. And then MLS figures out all the branding and the sponsorship and all that sort of stuff, right? So that's on them. But yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Like MLS will employ intermediaries that can go to the individual clubs and help them sign players that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think it's going to be really good there. We've been saying for much this season, or last season, I suppose, where he'd end up. And I remember saying, like, I think he'd be great even at a club like Gladbach or something. I still think he's got
Yep.
plenty to offer at top
Yep.
levels. Obviously MLS isn't the Bundesliga, but that's fine. I still think it's a league that'll intrigue him, and I think he'll do really well. Like you just have to look at the way Messi has kind of, managed to increase the longevity of his career, and I think Muller's a very similar type of player in the sense that he's very
Yeah.
good at reading the game. He knows where to stand. He knows where to walk if need be.
Yeah.
He's the kind of guy who can
That's
almost
true.
walk through a game like Messi, but still be extremely, you know, important to how his team plays. So yeah, I'm interested to see how he does.
Yeah, no, and I think you spot on with a few of the assessments there. The MLS is getting better every single year. It's not at the top five league level. That's just the reality. And how can it be? It's still too young. Um, I think the one thing that Müller will find difficult is the travel. It's a long way from Vancouver to really everywhere. You know, I was on the charter flight for that the Whitecaps had from Vancouver to Miami, right? With a bunch of other journalists when they played the CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinal there. That was a 6 hour flight, Stefan, for an away game, right? Like a domestic league. Well, equivalent of a domestic. I know this was an technically international competition, but they play in the same league. And so they do have these domestic home game trips where you are sitting 4 or 5 hours in a plane, right? And you still play home and away every week. And that can be really hard. And then there's different time zones. There's 3 different time zones. There's climate zones. Vancouver right now, like all summer long, it's between 20 and 25 degrees and sunny. There's places where you play when you go down to, let's say, like Houston. It's 40 degrees in sun. That can be tough. And so I think that is almost a bigger obstacle than the pace of the league, especially for some of these older players, right? The wear and tear that travel and different climate conditions put on the body, I think is a lot tougher than I think a lot of players think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we'll have to kind of see how gets on
Yeah.
with that. I mean, yeah, it's a very different aspect to European football, obviously.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, obviously, Buller's used to traveling for Champions League games and
Yeah.
things like that and stuff, but it's a very different kind of kettle of fish. So, yeah, we'll see how he gets on. He's obviously very vocal on social media these days, so I'm sure he'll make himself abundantly clear in that regard. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting one to keep an eye on. And, he's out there flying the flag for Germany, so that's good as well.
Yeah, and of course, Vancouver is World Cup host city 2026, so that's good for his brand. I think that plays a big role in this too. So, and yeah, it's a fun one. It's kind of great because of course Alfonso Davies went the other direction 7 years ago. When I started my career as a writer and covering the Whitecaps, and now I get to do this all again, but with a player coming the other way. So, and there's now talks of maybe Bayern Munich playing a friendly here and all that sort of stuff. So it's great. It's good news. Good news for the city of Vancouver. It's good news for the Vancouver Whitecaps. It's good news for Thomas Müller, and it's good news for us because it gives us more access to him, which is also great. So yeah, to be continued. But if you are my last little tidbit, if you are ready to order a Vancouver Whitecaps Thomas Müller jersey, I've been told don't order it with the number 25 or the number 13. A, those numbers are already taken, and B, apparently they have something special planned for his jersey. So don't go out there and order the jersey yet because I think the number will surprise a few people. I don't know what it is. Don't ask me. I have no idea. I've been told to wait, just like everyone else. So let's wait and see.